What am I looking for in the Bills' first preseason game against the Colts? I'm going to share those thoughts today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available for you on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, the Bills are going to play a game on Saturday at home, Highmark Stadium, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, against the Indianapolis Colts. The preseason kickoff. One of 3 games for the Buffalo Bills this preseason, 2 at home, 1 on the road against the Carolina Panthers. Pretty excited that I'll get a chance to be in attendance for 2 of those 3. Of course, the game on Saturday, and then the game in Charlotte against the Carolina Panthers. I do plan on spending some time at the Bills Mafia house before kickoff. So if you have the opportunity to swing by, come say hello. Would love the opportunity to meet as many of you as possible. It's always fun to meet listeners and talk football for a little bit, so please feel free to stop by and say hello. I really enjoy getting those interactions, so don't hesitate. Don't be a stranger. Would love to do it. But the Bills do have a game to play, and I'm excited. I'm excited about seeing this football team compete against another football team. There's so much depth on the Bills, and there's some real position battles, not so many starting battles that are available, but depth battles. And these preseason games are going to be really important to sort that out. And so what I want to do today is go by a position-by-position look at this team and some of the main storylines that I'm looking for some answers in this game on Saturday against the Colts. Now, the first thing that I will say, and this is kind of an overarching statement, not necessarily specific to any position, but the Bills are a deep football team. As I prepared this podcast and I came up with my talking points for each position group, the overarching thought in my mind was that this team should be pretty functional. There's some teams out there that their 90-man rosters they're just lacking. And you think about them getting through a preseason game and it's going to be clunky and sloppy. Shouldn't be for the Bills. The Bills should be a pretty efficient football team. I'm not going to sit here and promise you that they're going to make tons of explosive plays and really dominate the football game, but I'm here to tell you that the Bills have a lot of roster-worthy talent and really good depth, and we should feel that. We should sense that on Saturday. And as we get into the quarterback position, this is a really good example of what I'm talking about. We know that we're not going to see Josh Allen. Sean McDermott's already let us know that Josh Allen's not going to play on Saturday, and I think that's a perfectly good decision. But the Bills only have 2 quarterbacks on the roster not named Josh Allen, and it's Case Keenum and Matt Barkley. Those are guys that have played a good amount of football, especially Case Keenum. You would like to think that he should be able to come into the game, start the game really, and be efficient. Now, there's going to be some challenges around them. The Bills are going to have to play some depth players that aren't roster-worthy, especially on the offensive line. But these quarterbacks should keep their head above water, especially when you think about what's at their disposal at running back and at wide receiver. A lot of good players to work with, especially in a preseason setting. And so I do have a lot of interest in seeing how that plays out. And, Case Keenum as this guy that is experienced and we feel good about behind Josh Allen, would certainly like him to affirm that with a strong showing, an efficient showing on Saturday, where he's going to have a lot of opportunity to run Ken Dorsey's offense. Now, my expectations are certainly lower for Matt Barkley, and I think we'll see him, I would guess, probably the entire second half, something like that. But again, another guy that's played a lot of football, and I think he should at least keep the team on schedule. Again, not expecting a ton of dynamic plays, but he should keep the team functional, if that makes sense. At running back, this is really interesting to me because you think about young players and them getting opportunity and wanting to see what they can do in game situations. And James Cook is one of those players, but we kind of think James Cook's going to have a pretty important role for this team. So how do you balance that out with James Cook? What type of a workload do you want to give him in a preseason game? I think that there's a lot of value in a guy like James Cook who's never played an NFL snap in his life, stepping in and getting some opportunities, but how much of an opportunity? What do you do with Zach Moss? Zach Moss is your RB3 right now. That's my assumption. What type of a workload does Zach Moss get? Is Zach Moss getting carries into the third and fourth quarter of preseason game number 1? That'll be pretty telling for us. How about Duke Johnson, an established veteran player? Is he going to look like a running back that should be a top 2 or 3 option for an NFL team when he's getting carries in the third and fourth quarter of a preseason game? Raheem Blackshear, that's the only other back. I've went through them all. It's Devin Singletary, James Cook, Zach Moss, Raheem Blackshear, Duke Johnson. That's it. That's the group. So you're going to see Zach Moss and Duke Johnson and Raheem Blackshear touch the football a good amount in this game. Now, Raheem Blackshear is the UDFA out of Virginia Tech. I have a different feel for him than I do a Zach Moss or a Duke Johnson, who, like I said, potentially guys that could be top 2, top 3 backs for most NFL teams. It's going to be a little strange seeing them get carries late in preseason games. Now, with Raheem Blackshear, obviously I'm interested in watching him play as a UDFA and a guy fighting for a spot, but it kind of goes back to this special teams discussion that I had all week regarding Raheem Blackshear, where that's something that really popped for me in practice this week. And how does that translate to the game? How much do the Bills want to showcase if they do have this thought that this could be their eventual RB4 Taiwan Jones special teams extraordinaire? How much of that do you want to show on tape in preseason and risk him being a guy that other teams are after to have on their practice squad? Or maybe they think that they can get value from him as an RB4 that can play special teams this year. I think the Bills kind of have to work through that. Kind of a weird challenge, but it's certainly worth noting in my opinion. At wide receiver, there's a ton here. I mean, how about Khalil Shakir? I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. I think Case Keenum and Matt Barkley are going to want to throw the ball to Khalil Shakir because I'm not expecting to see Diggs or Davis at all in this game. And so that's going to put a bunch of other players in the spotlight for opportunity. And I think Khalil Shakir is a guy that is going to get a good bit of it. I think Isaiah Hodgins is another guy that's going to get a lot of opportunity. And we've heard about him and all the work that he's done with Gabriel Davis this offseason. A guy that can play multiple spots for the Bills. A guy that's getting opportunities in practice to play special teams. How does he deal with physical tight press coverage? Can he beat that? Can he deal with physicality as a route runner? What's he like at the catch point? I think Isaiah Hodgins is going to have a real opportunity to be that guy that has a chance to be a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 that presents that size and ball skills dynamic that Gabriel Davis provided. But now Gabriel Davis is your number 2 receiver, and that maybe opens the door for a guy like an Isaiah Hodgins. Does he go out and claim a spot like that with how he plays this preseason starting against the Colts? And then a couple of guys that were really good in the red and blue scrimmage, Neil Pau'u out of BYU and Tanner Gentry. These guys have somewhat quietly had a strong camp, it seems. You kind of intermittently hear good things about them. I saw Tanner Gentry on Wednesday get worked in with the first team offense for a few reps, and so how do they look in this game scenario? Can they force the issue? I think the Bills have a real numbers issue here at wide receiver. How do they get to the 6 or 7 that they're going to keep? And it's going to come with having to cut some reasonable players. And those guys, Isaiah Hodgins, Neil Pau'u, and Tanner Gentry are in that mix of the outside looking in, but, can they force the issue? That's what I'm really interested in finding out, of course, in addition to Khalil Shakir and him probably getting a fair amount of targets in this game on Saturday. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. It is delicious. It is cookie dough chunk puffs. They are phenomenal. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, covered in 100% real chocolate. And here's the deal. They're delicious, but they're healthy for you. Only 160 calories and a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. It is truly the perfect treat for anyone in your family. You want to try them out, make sure you get them now because they're going fast. They're only here for a limited amount of time. Go to built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Let's move on to the tight end position. I don't know we'll see Dawson Knox in this game, but I am interested in finding out how much O.J. Howard and Tommy Sweeney we see. Is there a competition for tight end too? I would say in my 2 days of watching practice, Tommy Sweeney looked better to me than O.J. Howard, but O.J. Howard was really kind of doing a lot of work with Dawson Knox as that presumed number 2 tight end, while Tommy Sweeney was kind of pulled in a lot of different directions, including special teams. So what type of opportunity does O.J. Howard get? If O.J. Howard doesn't play a lot in this game, that's going to be a big signal to me that he's pretty safe as a tight end too. I'll say that again. If O.J. Howard doesn't play a lot against the Colts, it's a signal to me that he's pretty safe as a team's tight end too. Now, if you're seeing him play a good amount and Tommy Sweeney's playing a good amount and they're kind of rotating those guys in and out, then I think we have a real position battle on our hands. Beyond that, how about Quentin Morris, who quietly had a good camp last year, quietly had a good camp again this year? Can he force the issue when it comes to being the tight end 3 for this football team? He gets a lot of opportunity in practice on special teams, and it feels like he's got some dynamic ability as a pass catcher. And then lastly with tight end is Jalen Watermeyer, the Bills UDFA out of Texas A&M. I thought he struggled on Wednesday. I thought he struggled on Thursday. He had bad drops in both practices. Does Jalen Watermeyer showcase himself as a practice squad worthy player? Can he push Quentin Morris? We'll find out. He'll get some opportunity to play on Saturday, but I think he's got a long ways to go. Offensive line should be very interesting. There's a lot to sort out here. You think the Bills will probably roster 9 offensive linemen. They'll stash probably 2 or 3 more on the practice squad. I think you have 7 players whose roster spots are safe. The 5 starters, Dawkins, Saffold, Morse, Ryan Bates, Spencer Brown, David Quessenberry, Tommy Doyle. I think those 7 guys are firm roster locks. So that means you have 2 spots available for guys like Greg Manns, Cody Ford, Bobby Hart. And maybe you're laughing when I say Bobby Hart, but they're playing him a lot at guard right now. And maybe they like him more at guard. Maybe there's something more meaningful there to tap into. Greg Van Roten as well as a guy that on Wednesday got some first-team reps, a guy that started 50 games over the last 4 seasons. Only 2 of those guys can make the team, and we haven't even mentioned Luke Tenuta, who's a draft pick, Jacob Capra, who was on the practice squad last year, and a few other UDFAs. So sorting out this depth for the offensive line is definitely a major storyline for us to be monitoring against the Colts and throughout the remainder of the preseason. Let's move to the defensive side of the football. We'll start at defensive tackle. The Bills have some nice depth at defensive tackle. We have a very established top 4 in my mind at Oliver, DeQuan Jones, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips. I think Tim Settle's that 4th guy. Curious to see how much he plays in this football game. But the Bills have even more depth behind that in Brandon Bryant and Eli Ankou. And both Bryant and Ankou have played regular season snaps for the Bills as practice squad call-up guys, and I think they both had their moments. That excites me because we know how much the Bills value the defensive line and talk about how everything starts up front. Well, having those guys, Bryant and Ankou, available really should allow this defense to function and give the Bills a real opportunity to see what they have in these depth linebackers. So I'd expect Bryant and Ankou to showcase themselves quite well and allow this defense to function. So those 2 players, in addition to Tim Settle and how much he plays in this game. Again, if Tim Settle doesn't play in this game, that's a good sign for Tim Settle that he's pretty secure. I never thought of him as a roster bubble guy. Don't get me wrong there, but If he doesn't play, that means the Bills probably feel really good about what they have there. That's what I'm trying to get at. I think he'll probably get some run, but Bryant and Nnankwo should be the main pieces up front, and those are guys that have been around that should play well in a preseason setting. Defensive ends, fascinating as well. We know about Von Miller. I'm sure he won't play. Greg Rousseau, maybe a few snaps, probably none. But then those next three guys, A.J. Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson, how much do they play? That's going to be interesting. Those are guys that are young and need reps, especially Basham and Epinesa. I think Shaq Lawson's a pretty established player. But if he's the fifth defensive end, he's going to have to play in this preseason game. Can we feel growth from Epinesa and Basham in this game? I thought both had strong practices both days that I was there to observe on Wednesday and Thursday. When you think about them as backup defensive ends. Interested to see them, and then even some more of the depth. Mike Love, who's been in the practice squad, it feels like for the last 10 years. Keeps on sticking around. What does he look like in preseason? And then you have these Daniel Joseph and Kingsley Jonathan. Can they be the new Mike Loves as your practice squad defensive end? And look, we laugh about that, but we've seen guys like an Ike Bucker kind of come through and stick around and eventually made a meaningful impact for the team. Like, that stuff does happen. And so maybe you sense some sarcasm here, but it's not what I mean. Like, there's legitimate opportunities for them to showcase themselves well and earn the opportunity to stick around. And if you stick around, eventually you're probably going to get a chance to play in a game. And when that happens, what do you look like? So I'm interested in seeing this depth at defensive end sort itself out and start to identify some of those really meaningful developmental players that you stash and see what you have. At linebacker, really excited to see Terrell Bernard. I think he'll play, right? I mean, he's a rookie, has a lot of versatility. Does he play Mike linebacker? That'll be interesting. I mean, the Bills need to figure out who their primary backup to Tremaine Edmonds is. Is it Tyrell Dotson? Is Tyrell Dotson going to play as a guy that really hasn't practiced this week? We're not exactly sure why. Can he play on Saturday? If he doesn't, does that mean a lot of opportunity for Terrell Bernard? And how does he look? Balin Spector as a draft pick with Andre Smith being suspended. There's a path for a guy like Balin Spector to make this team. He's flashed a bit in practice. He's athletic. What does he do with this opportunity? That's going to be really interesting. And then there's a couple of guys that have been in the league for a few years, and Markel Lee and Joe Giles Harris. When do they come on the field? What position do they play? What groupings are they with? How do they play? Can they prove themselves as significantly better players than a Balin Spector, who's a cost control rookie? It's interesting. We'll find out some answers on Saturday. Cornerback's another big one. These guys got to play. Kyer Elam's got to play. I think reps, the way that Kyer Elam's going to become more comfortable in the types of roles that he's going to be asked to play in this Bills defense is by playing football. Go out there and play. I think these are reps that are valuable for him. I want to see Kyer Elam play 2 or 3 series. He needs that. And then Christian Benford, who it feels like he's in a legitimate competition with Kyer Elam right now to be the guy opposite of Dane Jackson if Tre'Davious White's not available. Who shows up? Who makes plays? Who's more confident? Who understands coverage spacing better? Who tackles? I'm going to be really dialed in on these corners. And then there's a couple of other guys here in Nick McLeod and Cam Lewis who felt like earlier in camp there's a little bit more momentum and steam there. And some of that's faded a little bit lately. I thought Nick McLeod had a couple of good days of practice when I got a chance to watch him, but you're not hearing as much buzz, and you're certainly not hearing as much buzz about Cam Lewis. But early on, you did. Do they kind of recapture some of that momentum with a strong showing in the game? I'm sure they're both going to play a fair amount of snaps. Safety should be a pretty functional position. I mean, Jaquan Johnson, year 4 with the team. DeMar Hamlin, year 2 with Poyer and Hyde missing a lot of time this offseason. They've been repped quite a bit. You feel like they should come in and showcase themselves pretty well. Josh Thomas, intriguing player out of Appalachian State. Him and Nick McLeod will probably get some run together at safety. So I'm guessing you'll see Hamlin and Johnson for a bit, and then you'll see Thomas and McLeod for a bit. Leslie Frazier said specifically with Nick McLeod that it's all about the physicality that he shows. Well, this is your chance, bud. I'm excited to see those safeties. I think they should play well. They've had a lot of opportunity this offseason to work. Special teams, we all want to see the punt god wearing the shirt, Matt Ariza. Who gets that first punt opportunity? Who holds for Tyler Bass? Getting to do it in the stadium in a game setting. This is really meaningful stuff. I think these games will decide this punting battle. If Matt Ariza goes out there and punts well and holds well, is that it for Matt Hawk? Maybe that's it. Because at some point you want to pick your guy and just let them develop that timing with Reed Ferguson and Tyler Bass and just get all the reps in practice. I think the Bills will want to make that decision pretty quickly. If Matt Ariza goes out there and performs well, could that be it for Matt Hawk? We'll find out, but I feel like there's a lot of momentum for Ariza, especially after what I observed over the last 2 days of practice. And then, of course, the return situation, where I think Khalil Shakir is going to get a lot of opportunity. Wouldn't be surprised if Duke Johnson does as well as Raheem Blackshear. Those have been the guys getting the chances in practice. You know, Shakir is a guy that I feel like is a roster lock. And I think that'd be a great role for him this year. If Khalil Shakir can lock down that return guy role and then be that wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 that gets some run, that's really going to position him well to take off next season, which I've kind of talked about. I like that the Bills are in a situation right now where Isaiah McKenzie, Gabriel Davis, who kind of worked the last several years in this offense, have developed chemistry with Josh Allen, are now in position to really claim a bigger role. Well, Khalil Shakir is definitely in a guy that I can see having a similar course. But he's got to provide value right now, and I think maybe the best way he can do that is as a kick returner. So Khalil Shakir is a guy just overall really meaningful game for him on Saturday. Can't wait to watch it. It's going to be fun. Love watching the Bills play football. It feels, look, it's been a long time since we watched that friggin' divisional round game against the Chiefs. I'm ready to turn the page, and I feel like we have, and we've certainly had an entire offseason. But watching the Bills play a football game that we've never seen before is something that I'm ready for. I'm absolutely ready for it, and really ready to embrace what this 2022 football season is going to offer to us. And obviously, it's not the season opener, but this is how you get there. And there's a lot of meaningful depth competition on this team to sort out, and a lot of experienced players that are going to play a fair amount of snaps in this preseason game. There's a lot to sort out, and the stakes are high. I'm excited to watch it, and I'm excited to come back for you after the game and break down what I saw. I'll give you my top observations, and you'll get that some point late on Saturday night. The game's at 4. I know I mistakenly said 7 earlier this week, but it's at 4. So we'll get home, we'll get recorded, and I'll get you my thoughts, and then I'm hitting the road, driving back to Charlotte on Sunday morning. So it's been a fun week up here in Western New York, and obviously the last couple of days in Rochester. It's good being up here. Certainly miss being home with my family and in my office with my normal recording setup, and not here in a hotel room with weird lighting and not the camera that I typically use. So it's always a little bit of a challenge when I have to record these podcasts remotely, but it's really meaningful for me to gain this information and have boots on the ground. And so hopefully you guys can tolerate a little bit of abnormality in our schedule here, but we'll get back to it next week. And of course we have more to talk about this week, so don't miss anything. Make sure that you are subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow after the game.